case you're wondering, this person right here is this person right here. I'm a literary scholar. I'm doing my PhD in English here at the university. And when I tell people that I'm doing a PhD in English, I suspect they've got a slightly different picture in their minds than I have in my mind. It's a bit of an image problem we have in the English department. I think most of us see ourselves as these sort of poetic nymph creatures. We wander barefoot through the grass in the park and we compose sonnets in our minds, and we are the keepers of the great secrets of the human intricacies of the world, and we are quite proud of that. The image that I have in my mind when I think about what I do looks a little bit like that. I quite like it. It's quite glamorous. But unfortunately, it is not shared outside my department. When I tell people at parties what I do, I'm pretty sure they're seeing more like this. Yeah, not so glam. But it's not true anymore. We have modernised. We don't sit under piles of ancient tomes anymore. We don't sit in stuffy offices. I've only fallen over in the library like twice this year, so that's just not accurate anymore. And I want to give you a mental image of the modern literary scholar tonight. Next time someone says to you that they are a literary scholar, I want you to see this next image and I want you to picture them as a state-of-the-art, as a digital, a 21st century creature. I want you to see something more like this. Yes, they have given us computers. We don't all know how to use them. Some of us curse at them daily. But we are learning how to use them because largely of the volume of digital texts that are available online these days. Things like Google Books and Project Gutenberg, which I'll show you in a minute, give us a window into a new world of digital and computational methodologies that we just haven't had before. So we're playing a little bit of catch-up. I'm going to walk you through a method that I'm using at the moment, using software to scan novels to look at how they might be related to one another. So because my general research topic is in genetics in fiction, I'm looking at how bioengineered characters are represented in modern fiction. I've been doing a lot of reading on genetics and reading a lot of articles in that field. And I came across one that does this. There's a team at UC Berkeley who've developed software that compares two genomes, and these are genomes here represented as text. So you've got your adenine, your thymine, your guanine, and your cytosine. So they're looking at these two different genomes, and they're using a scanning software package. It's a Unix package. It uses command line scripts, if you know what that means. If you don't, get to it. They compare these genomes and they look for commonalities. So if they've programmed their software to look for 4-character text strings, then the software will scan through the first 4 characters, the second 4 characters, the third 4 characters, and so on. And when it sees the same characters in 2 different genomes in that 4-character string, it will go, bingo, TCAT, TCAT. It will build those matches into a profile that says, based on X number of matches between genome A and genome B, we think that they might be X percentage related. And they end up with a phylogenetic tree. So if you're a biologist and you know what that looks like, you'll be following me. But if not, it's a kind of a map that tells you how related different species are. And for instance, you might see a human on one of these maps is 30% related to a head of lettuce. Makes you think about less of yourself, doesn't it? But that's the kind of thing that it builds. So the people that developed the software were quite clued on, and they realised that all they're doing here is scanning text. Now, it's not only genomes that take the form of text, and they were quite clued on to that. As a kind of a test of how well it would work, they applied the software to English novels and to various other types of books. And they came up with this graph, or this map, that shows you how different novels are related to one another. So because you're looking at those character strings, it's picking up the types of strings or the types of words that appear most commonly in different books, and it maps the vocabulary, the linguistic and kind of syntactic traits of one book against another. So a couple of things come up when you look at this. You can see that books by the same author, like the Austen novels here, tend to be related by a branch. And that's because both those books will be subsets of Jane Austen's vocabulary which will itself be a subset of the vocabulary of England at the time she was writing. The other thing you can see is that books in the same genre tend to be quite heavily related. So, for instance, the religious texts here, even though you might think of those as being very diverse in terms of what they say, their syntactic style and their language use is similar enough that their relatedness comes up in this map. Now, if you're a bit of a book nerd like me, you look at this and get quite excited. It's quite interesting, I quite like it. But it's not really at this stage answering any research questions. So what I'm trying to do is adapt this software so that I can use it to answer specific questions that come up in my research. And that's what I've done. So I wanted to know, for instance, whether there was a common lexicon, a common kind of language and language use in novels that are written about orphans. So I've gone through and collected 5 texts about orphans here. And as a control group, I'm going to map those on a tree against 5 orphans that are not about orphans. So in order to control for time fluctuations, because language changes over time, I've matched the dates as closely as possible so that for every orphan protagonist, I've got a non-orphan protagonist from the same roughly decade or two. So I'm going to show you quickly how I go about getting those texts into a readable form for the software and then mapping them against one another. So first of all, we've got to actually get the novel and make it readable by software. Software does not read like your eye, and to be completely honest, when I get a text string that the software will read, it makes me want to throw myself out a window because it looks so horrible. But basically what we've got to do is get a digital copy of the text first. And to do that, I go to Project Gutenberg, which has, if you haven't been there, it's got 40,000 free digital texts that you can download, that you can use for your research purposes, that you can read online. It's fantastic. So I'm searching here for a novel called Tom Jones. This is not the shaking singer, but it's a 1700s novel by Henry Fielder. And I'm going to copy that whole novel and dump the entire text of it into a Word document. Once I've got it in my Word document, I can play around with it a little bit. I can get rid of some of the formatting that would confuse the software. I can get rid of Project Gutenberg's text. And I can get rid of a lot of the characters that aren't really textual information. So things like punctuation marks, spaces, any kind of information that is not a text character is going to be gotten rid of. Looks like our video is freezing up a little bit here, but I'll show you what it looks like once you get the finished product. That is my text string. Believe it or not, this one is actually Frankenstein. If you've ever read Frankenstein in a book, it's in the form of letters. This does not look like letters, but the software can read it. Next thing to do is to take all these digitized texts that are now in the form of genomic-like strings and to actually run them through the software so that I get a map. So this is Unix software, meaning, this took me many months by the way, I had to figure out how to use this horrible thing called a terminal. The name kind of describes how I feel about it too. And in the terminal I'm entering commands that will call upon the software I've installed and kind of tell it what to do. So for a text analysis, I'm not sure if any of you have eyes who want to read that, but I'm telling it, FFP text, I want a feature frequency profile of a text document. I'm telling it all the documents that I want it to scan, and then I'm telling it what kind of format I want it to end up in. What it looks like in the end is this. So I've got in green here all the texts that have orphan protagonists, so Great Expectations, Jane Eyre, Oliver Twist, Frankenstein and Tom Jones, and I've mapped them against the control of non-orphan texts. So Mill on the Floss, Pride and Prejudice, Tristram Shandy, The Scarlet Letter and Jack Sheppard. And I want to see now whether there are any significant relationships between those texts. So what I was kind of hoping for, which hasn't really happened, is that the orphan texts would be clustered off on one side and they would have a lot of shared branches, and the non-orphan texts would be clustered off on the other side. Hasn't so much happened, but we do have a couple of shared branches. We've got a shared branch, for instance, called Pride and Prejudice and Tom Jones. Now, those novels are not a lot alike, and half the pleasure of this kind of analysis is it throws up commonalities that you would never, ever have picked if you'd read the books. So this would be a research lead that I can go and follow up if I want to. But because I'm interested in other things at the moment, I'm going to focus on this little shade branch here. Oliver Twist and Jack Shepherd are two novels that were both first serialised. And I wouldn't have thought that they were that closely related. But if I dig in a little bit deeper, I found out after following this lead right here that they were both serialised in the same periodical when they were first released, and that the editor of that periodical was the guy who wrote this. Charles Dickens has written his own novel, and then it's possible, looking at the similarity that comes up in this analysis, that he's also edited the other novel he was in charge of serialising, and that his vocabulary and his experience of the text has come to play on both those novels, the one he wrote and the one he edited. And that's just a possibility, and I can't conclude anything from this. But what I can do is follow a lead. So this is giving me that little inkling of an idea that I can follow up through my close readings. Because of course close readings are the bread and butter if you're a literary scholar. Now if this is all that excited you, and you want to try some of this yourself, Google has a product that you can use to do your own analyses. It's called the Ngram Viewer, and it draws on 5.2 million texts in Google Books database. So what you can do here is enter any keyword that you're interested in, and it will spit out a graph showing that word's frequency in all the books in its database. And it'll give you a time series. So we can see, for instance, the frequency of our word parent in 1800, right up to 2000. And I'm trying a few different words here. So I've entered father, and we can see that the frequency of that word has kind of dropped off a little bit since, can't read that, 1930. So this is another lead for me to follow up. I can then look at books around that era and see, is there a changing attitude to the father? Are we losing interest in paternity? Or have we just changed the language we're using? If you look at the term dad, there's a huge exponential increase in its usage. So is it possible that we're casualising our understanding of what it means to be a father? So this just gives you a bit of an inkling of some of the new methodologies that are coming up in English departments. And I really hope that next time someone at a party tells you they're an English major, you see something more along the lines of this than a stuffy old guy in an office. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.